The gym was full. Parents sat on foldable chairs. Students leaned on the walls. Teachers stood near the back. It was the annual school talent show, and the stage had already seen dancers, singers, and a magician who dropped his hat twice. The crowd was cheerful, but they weren't expecting anything special. It was just another small-town school event. Then the principal tapped the mic and cleared his throat. He smiled and read the next name from the paper in his hand. Please. Welcome, our next performer, a solo piano piece by a student named Lena. Some students raised their eyebrows. Lena. She wasn't popular. She wasn't part of the music club. She hardly spoke in class. And most kids didn't even know she existed, as Lena walked slowly from the side curtain. A few laughs rose in the crowd, not loud, but loud enough. She wore a plain sweater, loose jeans, and shoes that had seen better days. Her hair was tied back, and her face looked unsure but calm. One boy near the front whispered, "What is she doing up there?" A group in the back chuckled. Lena didn't look at anyone. She kept her eyes on the piano. It was an old upright placed in the center of the stage, slightly out of tune. But to her it was something more, something sacred. She sat down quietly, adjusted the bench, and placed her fingers gently on the keys from where the audience sat. She looked too fragile to play anything big, a girl with no stage presence, no name, no reason to be there, at least in their eyes. "Watch her mess up," someone whispered. Another laughed softly. Even a few parents looked down at their programs, expecting just another awkward act, but Lena didn't move right away. She sat still for a moment. Her hands hovered, frozen in air. Then she closed her eyes and pressed the first note. The sound was soft. So soft it almost faded before reaching the crowd. Then came the second note, and the third. A slow melody began to take shape. People kept talking for a few seconds, but their voices faded. It wasn't because someone told them to stop. It was because something about the way Lena played made them stop. Her fingers moved gently, carefully. She didn't rush. She didn't show off. She just played, like the music was already inside her, like it had always been there, waiting for. This one moment, the gym grew quieter. Even the teachers at the back leaned forward. The group of students who had laughed sat with their mouths slightly open. They weren't sure what was happening. They only knew they didn't expect this. Lena continued, her head slightly bowed. Her eyes stayed closed, but the story she was telling through the keys felt real. The music rose and dipped like a soft wave. It had no words, but it said everything. The song didn't sound like anything they had heard from a student before. It sounded older, deeper, like it came from somewhere far beyond school walls. A parent in the third row lowered her phone and stopped recording. She just wanted to listen. Another father put down his coffee and whispered, "She's really good." By the time Lena reached the middle of her song, no one was laughing. No one even blinked. All eyes were on the girl who had walked in like a shadow, and now played like the only light in the room. Her hands moved faster now, still, calm, but full of emotion. There was something in the way she played, like she was remembering someone, or saying something she couldn't put into words. No one could explain why they felt the way they did. They just knew something was changing inside them. The students who once whispered jokes now sat silently. The teachers looked at each other, surprised and impressed. Even the janitor stopped, sweeping in the hallway, and peeked in, drawn by the sound as Lena neared the final notes. The gym was completely silent. No phones clicked, no papers rustled, just her and the piano. In a room that had forgotten how to breathe, Lena's eyes were still closed as her fingers danced across the keys. Each note she played wasn't just music, it was a memory. The audience didn't know, but this song wasn't written by someone famous. It didn't come from a book. It came from her childhood, from a small apartment where an old piano sat by the window, from a time when her world felt safe, when her mother's voice was the warmest sound she knew. Her mother used to play this melody when she cooked, when she cleaned, when Lena had nightmares and couldn't sleep. And every time her mother played it, Lena felt peace. It was like a lullaby, also a story that spoke without words, that told her, "You're safe here, you are loved." But that piano hadn't been touched in years, in that home. It was gone now. Lena had lost her mother when she was 10. A fire had started in their apartment building. They were both home that night. She remembered the smell of smoke, the way her mother pushed her out through the hallway, yelling for her. To run, she remembered the sirens, the people outside. The cold wind on her face as she cried. Her mother never came out. After that, everything changed. She moved in with an aunt who didn't like music. The piano was sold, the apartment was cleared out, and the song disappeared from her life for years. She didn't touch a piano. She didn't even let herself hum the melody. It hurt too much. Every note reminded her of the warmth she could never have again. The silence was easier, safer, until one day, a teacher at school heard her humming quietly to herself. The teacher asked, "Do you play?" Lena had shaken her head, but the teacher didn't give up. She showed her the school's old music room, small, dusty, and quiet. There was a piano in there, too, slightly out of tune, but still standing. And one afternoon, when no one was around, Lena sat down and placed her hands on the keys. It was the first time in years she had touched a piano. At first, her hands shook, but when she pressed the first note of the melody, something inside her opened again. She cried quietly that day, not because she was sad, but because for the first time in a long time, she felt like her mother was. Close again. Since then, Lena had been sneaking into the music room during lunch breaks and after school. She played the same melody over and over, adding her own little touches, changing a few notes, letting it become hers. She didn't care if anyone heard. She didn't want to perform. She just wanted to feel close to the memory that meant everything to her. But when the school announced a talent show, her music teacher encouraged her to sign up. She said, "Maybe it's time someone else hears this too." Lena wasn't sure. She wasn't looking for attention. But part of her wanted to be brave. Part of her wanted her mother's song to be heard again. Not just in an empty room, but by others. Maybe it could touch someone else the way it touched her. And now here she was, sitting on a stage with hundreds of eyes watching her, but in her mind, she was back in that warm little apartment. The smell of soup in the air, her mother humming. Beside her, her fingers moved faster now, telling the rest of the story. Oh, the middle of the song carried the sorrow she had locked away for so long. It told of loss, of silence, of being alone in a world that kept moving without her. But the song didn't. And there it lifted again. Not too bright, just enough to say, "I'm still here. I'm still holding on." The audience had no idea what the melody meant, but they didn't need to, because true music doesn't need translation. They could feel the truth behind every note, and that was enough. A teacher wiped her eyes quietly in the back row. A student who had teased Lena earlier sat still, hands in his lap, unsure why he felt like crying. Even the principal leaned forward, eyebrows furrowed, moved in ways he couldn't explain. Lena's world was no longer just hers. It had reached them. Her sound had become their feeling, and as her song neared the final verse, her fingers softened. She knew the last part was coming, the part where her mother always smiled and said, "Now breathe," so she played it slow. One note at a time, each one floating through the gym like a whisper, like a goodbye, like a hand on your back telling you it's going to be okay, and in that moment, she wasn't playing for the crowd. She was playing for one person, one memory, one love she had never let go of, and her world once silent. Once hidden was now being heard, note by note, heart to heart. Long before Lena sat on that stage, long before the crowd fell silent, and even before she knew the names of keys or chords, there was her mother and there was music. They lived in a small apartment with thin walls and peeling paint, but to Lena, it was warm and full of love. The place was always quiet. Except for the sound of the old piano that stood by the window, it wasn't fancy. Some of the keys stuck, and it always went out of tune in winter. But her mother loved it, and so did Lena. Her mother used to say, "You don't need to speak. When you can let your fingers do the talking," and every evening after dinner, she'd play. Soft tunes, lullabies, little songs she made up just for fun. Lena would curl up on the couch and listen. Sometimes she'd fall asleep to the sound. Other times, she'd sit beside her mother and press the lower keys with one finger. One night, her mother played a tune that was different. It wasn't cheerful or sleepy. It was slow and deep. Lena asked, "Why does that one feel like it's telling a secret?" Her mother smiled gently and said, "Because it is. It's a song from my heart. It's the one I play when I miss the people I can't talk to anymore. That night stayed with Lena for years, even though she was only 7 at the time. She remembered the way her mother's eyes looked far away but calm. She remembered that song more than any other. She didn't know it had a name. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it didn't need one. She started calling it Mom's secret song. And whenever her mother played it, Lena knew she needed space, or comfort, or both. Then one day, everything changed. It was cold. The middle of November, Lena was in her pajamas, sitting on the couch. Her mother was making tea in the kitchen. They were supposed to decorate for the winter holidays that weekend. But they never got the chance. The fire came fast, a faulty wire. In the kitchen sparked. Lena remembered the smoke alarm screaming. She remembered her mother grabbing her by the shoulders and shouting, "Run, now!" The hallway was full of smoke. She coughed and cried. People were yelling. Neighbors were banging on doors. She got out somehow, but her mother never did. After that, everything blurred. There were sirens, lights, cold blankets, and unfamiliar voices. She was sent to live with her aunt in another part of town. The piano didn't come with her. It was gone, just like everything else. Lena didn't speak much after that. She didn't smile. She didn't cry in front of anyone. She went to school, came home, and stayed quiet. Her aunt didn't like music. She said it brought too many memories, so Lena never asked for a piano. She didn't even hum. She buried the sound deep inside her chest and locked it away. Years passed like that until one day in high school, she was walking past the music room. The door was open slightly inside. Someone was practicing the violin. The tune wasn't the same, but something about it reminded her of Mom's secret song. And without meaning to, she started humming it softly under her breath. A teacher passing by stopped and listened. She turned to Lena and asked, "Do you know what you're humming?" Lena shook her head. "It's just something my mom used to play." The teacher smiled. "It's beautiful. You should come try it on the piano sometime." Lena didn't go that day, or the day after. But a week later, she snuck in during lunch. When no one was around, the piano in the room was older. The bench wobbled slightly. But when she placed her hands on the keys, her fingers remembered more than her brain did. She played the first few notes. Slow and unsure, then more. And before she knew it, she had played the whole song from memory. The notes weren't perfect. Her timing was off, but her heart was exactly where it needed to be. For the first time in years, she cried not because she was sad, but because she finally felt like her mother was near again, like she had found a piece of home inside that song. And from that day on, Lena returned to that piano again and again, adding to the song, playing it softer, slower, richer, letting it grow as she did. It became her story too, not just her mother's. So when the school announced the talent show and her teacher gently encouraged her to sign up, Lena didn't say no. She didn't want the spotlight. She only wanted to share the song that saved her, the song that had no name but carried everything she never said. And now, it was no longer just hers. It was about to belong to everyone who heard it. The song flowed through the room like a quiet river. Not fast, not loud, just calm and steady. But it carried something no one expected. It carried truth. Lena sat with her eyes closed, her fingers moving softly across the keys. She wasn't showing off. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply remembering. And though the crowd didn't know what the song meant, they could feel it, even without words. They could feel the weight behind every note. At first, people watched out of curiosity. Now, they listened with stillness. The same students who laughed earlier sat frozen in their seats. Some leaned forward. Some held their breath without realizing. A girl in the second row clutched her hands together. She had never cried at a school event before, but now her eyes were wet. A lump sat in her throat, and she didn't know why. A boy near the back, who had once made fun of Lena, stared blankly at the piano. His smirk was gone. His face softened. He didn't understand the music. But it made him think about the time his sister left for college, about the last hug they shared. Even one of the judges, an older man with gray hair, sat back in his chair. He had seen hundreds of student performers over the years, some better trained, some louder, some flashier, but none had ever made him feel this quiet inside. He whispered to the teacher next to him, "She's not just playing, she's telling us something." The teacher nodded slowly, tears building. In her eyes, too, the gym wasn't silent because of fear or rules. It was silent because no one wanted to break the moment. They were inside her song now, and her song was fragile, like glass. One wrong move might shatter it. The janitor leaned against the doorway, mop in hand. He had heard music before, but this felt like something sacred. Parents who had come just to clap for their kids now sat still. Their phones lowered, their minds quiet. Even the chatter of the hallway outside had faded. It was like the whole building had paused because of a girl no one expected, because of a song with no name, because of a moment no one saw coming. Lena's head tilted slightly as she moved into the deeper part of the melody. Her hands no longer hesitated. She played like she was floating, like she was exactly where she belonged. The notes grew softer, slower, each one sinking deeper into the hearts of everyone listening. Some felt pain, others felt comfort, but all felt something, and that was the difference. This wasn't just a performance, it was a confession, a memory, a quiet scream turned into beauty. The school principal, standing at the side of the room, watched carefully. He remembered seeing Lena in the hallway, always quiet, always polite. He never imagined this shy girl had something so powerful inside her. The sound of a sniffle came from the far left. A father wiped his eyes and smiled. Not because he was sad, but because something inside him had been touched, a soft place he didn't visit often. Another student placed a hand on her chest. She didn't know why, but it felt like Lena's song had opened a memory she had locked away. A goodbye she had never said. And through all this, Lena didn't look up. She didn't search the crowd. She didn't wait for approval. She simply kept playing. Because this wasn't about them. Not really. This was her way of speaking, of remembering, of healing. The final section of the song began, a return to the opening melody. Slower now, more peaceful. Like someone letting go of a heavy breath. And just before the last note, Lena paused, for only a second, then pressed it softly, letting it ring through the air like a final whisper. The moment the sound faded, no one clapped, not yet, no one even moved, because the room had forgotten how to breathe. The final note rang through the gym like a soft echo. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it landed in every heart like a whisper that wouldn't go away. Lena slowly lifted her hands from the keys. She didn't look up right away. Her fingers rested on her lap, still quiet. She took one slow breath and held it. For a second, the room felt frozen in time. No clapping, no talking, just silence. The kind of silence that happens only when people feel something they didn't expect. The kind of silence that's filled with emotion, too heavy for words. She opened her eyes and looked down at the keys. She didn't know how the audience would react. She didn't even care, because the song had done what it needed to do. It had spoken for her. It had honored her mother. It had finally been heard. Then one person stood, a teacher near the back, hands gently coming together. Then another and another. Soon the sound of clapping began to rise, slow at first, unsure, then louder, fuller. People stood to their feet, not because they were told, not because it was polite, but because they had to. Because their hearts told them this wasn't just applause. It was respect, it was gratitude, it was awe. Lena looked up slowly. Her eyes met a sea of people now standing, clapping, some with hands over their mouths, some with tears on their cheeks, others simply staring, as if still trying to understand what they had just felt. The students who had laughed earlier, they clapped the loudest, not because they wanted to look good, but because they knew they were wrong. They didn't just misjudge her. They had nearly missed something beautiful. One boy near the front, who had whispered a rude joke before now, looked down at his shoes. He clapped quietly, ashamed. Another girl who never spoke to Lena wiped her eyes and smiled through tears. The music had reached them in places no one could see. In the second row, a woman pressed a tissue to her face. She didn't know the girl on the stage, but somehow the song had taken her back to a memory of her own mother, to a letter she never wrote, to a goodbye she never said. Even the principal stood, clapping slowly with his eyes locked on Lena. He had seen many students come and go, but none like her. None who could turn a gym full of noise into a moment of stillness. The judge with gray hair leaned toward the music teacher and whispered, "She doesn't need training. She needs a stage." The teacher nodded. Smiling through proud tears, she finally found her voice. She replied. Lena stood from the bench slowly. She wasn't smiling, but her face was calm, peaceful. She bowed her head gently, a small thank you, then turned and walked off the stage. She didn't wait for cheers. She didn't look for praise. She had given the room her heart, and now she carried nothing but peace. Backstage, she leaned against the wall and exhaled, her hands still shaking slightly, not from fear, but from release. From letting go of something she had carried alone for so long. The sound of the clapping still echoed beyond the curtain. But inside Lena's mind, it was quiet, and that silence was more beautiful than any noise. Outside in the crowd, conversations had begun. Who is she? Where did she learn to play like that? I wasn't ready for that. That was something else. But no one knew the story behind the song. No one knew the long nights she spent alone, the empty room, the quiet pain, the courage it took. Just to walk onto that stage, still, they felt it. They didn't need the full story to understand the truth, because the song had done the talking. And the final note, that soft, fading sound, had done what no speech, no trophy, no introduction ever could. It made them feel something real. And once someone makes you feel something real, you never forget them. The stage lights dimmed as Lena walked off. But the feeling in the gym stayed behind. People didn't rush to leave. They stood for a moment. Still clapping softly, some wiped their faces, some held their hands to their chests, and others just stood there. Quiet and unsure of what to say, backstage, Lena sat on a folding chair with her hands in her lap. She felt light, almost weightless. Her heart had calmed, the music had spoken. And now, she could breathe again. The teacher who had encouraged her entered quietly. She knelt beside Lena and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You were brilliant," she whispered. Lena looked down and smiled softly. "Thank you for telling me to try," she replied. The teacher's eyes filled with tears. "No, thank you for sharing your heart." Word spread fast by the end of the event. Everyone was talking about her, not the dancers, not the magician, not even the comedy skit that got the most laughs. They were all talking about the quiet girl who played like her soul had been waiting to speak. The next morning at school, things felt different. She walked down the hallway with her backpack tight against her shoulder. She expected the same silence, the same glances past her face. But this time, people actually looked at her. A girl from math class smiled and nodded. A boy from history whispered, "That was amazing." As she passed, even the janitor gave her a small salute as he mopped the hallway. It wasn't loud attention, but it was enough to make her feel seen. She wasn't used to people stopping her, but that day, teachers called her aside between classes. One gave her a music magazine and said, "You belong in here one day." Another handed her a form for a city music contest. "Think about it," he said. "You already have what most performers dream of, even her classmates." The ones who had once laughed changed. Some said sorry, some couldn't meet her eyes, but many simply said, "Thank you," as if her song had healed something inside them too. She ate lunch outside under a tree, as she always did. But this time, she wasn't alone. A few students joined her, not to talk too much, just to sit. And sometimes, quiet company is the loudest kind of kindness. Later that week, the school published a short article on the performance. They posted a photo of Lena at the piano with the headline, "One song, one stage, one moment that moved us all underneath it." Quotes from students and staff. She made the gym silent. "I cried, and I don't even know why. I hope she never stops playing." Lena didn't feel like a star. She didn't want to be, but for the first time, she felt like her music had a place. Not just inside her, but out in the world too. She was invited to play again at a small school event. This time, she didn't hesitate. She said yes with a soft smile, because now, she understood it wasn't about her. It was about the people listening, about the way a song can carry things words cannot. At home, her aunt was quiet. She didn't speak much about the show, but one night, Lena found something unexpected. A small photo frame placed on the kitchen table. Inside it, a picture of Lena's mother smiling beside her piano. No note, no words, just the photo. Lena stared at it for a long time, her eyes filled with tears. In that silence, she knew her aunt had watched the show too. Music had reached her. Too, in its own quiet way, Lena returned to the school piano often after that. Not to hide, but to grow. She started writing her own songs, some happy, some soft, some full of quiet fire. She didn't want to be famous, she just wanted to be honest, to play what was real, to share what her mother gave her, and maybe, someday, give it to someone else who needed it. And so, after the storm of applause, after the stares and whispers, after the spotlight had dimmed, Lena stood not taller, but truer. And for a girl who had once been invisible, that was more than enough. The seasons slowly changed. Winter melted into spring, and with each passing week, Lena felt herself opening up. Not all at once, but quietly, like a flower learning how to face the sun again. She still sat at the same lunch spot, still wore the same clothes, still walked the same halls, but something inside her had shifted. And others felt it too. The music room became her second home. She wasn't hiding there anymore. Now she was creating. She began writing her own songs, tiny pieces of her heart turned into sound. Some came from dreams, some from memories, some from emotions she didn't even understand yet. Her teacher noticed and gave her a worn-out journal. The cover was soft and faded. Inside it were blank pages. "This is for your songs," the teacher said with a smile. Lena took it with both hands, like it was something sacred, because to her it was. Each day after school, she filled one more page, sometimes just a few notes, sometimes full melodies. Each one whispering to her, "Keep going, you're finding your voice." One afternoon, while practicing in the music room, a knock came at the door. She looked up and saw a tall woman with a soft smile and kind eyes. She introduced herself as a volunteer. "From a youth music foundation, I heard about your performance," she said gently. "And I'd like to invite you to play at our city showcase next month." Lena froze. She had never played outside of school, never for strangers. The idea scared her. What if she wasn't good enough? What if the city crowd wasn't like her school? But the woman must have seen the hesitation in her eyes. She stepped closer and said, "Your music made people feel something real, and that's exactly what we need." That night, Lena sat on her bed, the invitation in her hand. She looked at her journal full of songs. Then at her mother's photo on the shelf, her heart beat fast, not from fear, but from something new, readiness. She whispered softly, "I think it's time." The weeks passed quickly. The showcase was held in a small concert hall downtown. The stage wasn't grand, but to Lena, it felt like a dream. She wore a simple dress and carried her journal in her bag. When her name was called, she walked slowly to the piano. The lights were warm. The room was full, and yet she didn't feel small. She played one of her own songs, not her mother's, but one inspired by her. It started soft, almost like a secret. Then it rose gently, filled with hope by the time she reached the final notes. The room had gone still. There wasn't loud cheering, but there were tearful eyes, soft smiles, people leaning forward in their seats, listening with their hearts. After the show, people approached her with kind words. One woman said, "That song reminded me of my son.
Wow.
He passed 2 years ago, but tonight I felt close to him again." Another person handed her a small card. It belonged to a community radio station. "Would you like to record something with us?" they asked. Lena was overwhelmed, not because she wanted fame, but because her music was starting to touch lives the way her mother's music once touched hers. Back at school, more students began joining her during practice. Some just listened. Others brought their own instruments. Soon, the music room wasn't just Lena's space. It became a place for healing, expression, and quiet courage. Her teacher started calling it the listening room, because no one interrupted, no one judged, they just listened. Lena smiled more these days, not big loud smiles, but the kind that live in the eyes, the kind that come from feeling seen. She had found her voice, and more importantly, she was learning how to share it. Music no longer belonged only to the past. It belonged to her present, and her future too. A new chapter had begun. Not with noise, not with spotlight, but with the quiet strength of a girl who once played with her eyes closed and now played with her heart wide open. Years passed, the city changed, people grew older. New students filled the hallways of the school where it all began. But some things, some moments refused to fade. In a quiet corner of the school, the piano still sat, polished, cared for, tuned gently every month above it. A small bronze plaque had been added. It read, "Dedicated to the girl who reminded us that music is a voice of the soul." Most students didn't know her name at first, they just heard stories. Whispers passed down from teachers and older kids about a shy girl who once made an entire gym fall silent, about a song that made people cry without knowing why. And slowly the legend grew. New students would pause by the piano, some touched the keys, some simply sat beside it. But all of them felt something, as if the air around it remembered too. At the community radio station, her recordings were played once every season. Listeners wrote letters. I don't know who she was, but that song helped me grieve. Her music feels like a warm memory I never lived. She played like she had lost something, but found peace. Lena never sought attention after the city's showcase. She kept living her life simply. She never chased the stage. Instead, she taught children at a small local music center. Most of them came from homes where silence was louder than love. To those kids, Lena wasn't a legend. She was the kind lady who listened, who never rushed them, who said it was okay if the notes were messy, as long as they were real. She didn't talk much about her own story, but sometimes when a child felt invisible, she'd smile softly and say, "I know what it feels like to be quiet, but you can still make people feel something without shouting." And that was enough. Because her music wasn't about being loud, it was about being true. Once during a local event, a young girl stood on stage to perform. She wore a simple dress and held a trembling sheet of paper. She looked nervous. Her hands shook as she sat at the piano. But then she played, and when the first note filled the air, an older woman in the back row smiled with tears in her eyes. She leaned toward the person beside her and whispered, "That girl reminds me of Lena, because the heart remembers." And when music is born from pain, from hope, from truth, it stays with you years later. A journalist stumbled upon Lena's story. He had been writing a piece about forgotten moments that changed communities. He visited the school, he listened to her old recording at the radio station, he sat beside her piano, and when he finished writing, he titled the article, "The Girl Who Played Once and Played Forever." The story went viral quietly. Not like a loud fire, but like a slow, steady light that touched hearts across the country. People shared it, commented things like, "I wish I knew her, she sounds like someone who healed the world without even knowing it." Lena never read the article. She didn't need to, because by then, she had already planted hundreds of little seeds in the hearts of her students, in the hands of young musicians, in the soul of a community that never forgot how they felt when she played. And every time someone sat at that old piano, every time, a new melody was born. Lena's spirit lived on, not as a ghost, but as a gentle presence. A reminder that sometimes the quietest people have the loudest impact. In the end, it wasn't the applause or the spotlight, or even the tears that defined her. It was the silence, the beautiful, breathtaking silence that fell over a crowded gym when a shy girl played her heart out and the world listened. They still do.